Volume 5, Advanced Steadicam Techniques. Workshop instructor Jerry Holway is a Steadicam master. He teaches Steadicam workshops throughout the States and abroad. His experience on feature films such as Donnie Brasco, In Dreams, The Apostle, My Fellow Americans, The Long Kiss Goodnight, and many others establish him as an expert Steadicam instructor for this award-winning workshop.
Why use the Steadicam? Well, for one thing, it's like a handheld camera, but it doesn't have that jitteriness of a handheld camera. It's a much more natural and human view of the world. When you move a Steadicam through space, it's the way you might go through that same space. And that's one of the primary reasons for using a Steadicam. Second reason is the Steadicam can accelerate through space faster and more precisely than any other object. You can't accelerate a dolly as fast as you can a Steadicam, nor can you stop it. So you can have a lot of energy with a Steadicam, and some of the shots that we'll see later have that kind of energy. A third reason to use a Steadicam might be that there is no other way to get a camera into that space, or a camera other than a handheld shaky one. The floor might not support it, or you might be going up on a set of risers like we have behind me. You might be in a space that's too tight to put in another camera, or simply there's not enough time to get a larger camera or a crane or something like that to the space that you're working in. So sometimes the Steadicam is there to solve a small problem, and sometimes the Steadicam is used to give a sense of a certain quality to the image, a certain emotional quality. That's the part I like best, this emotional capability of the Steadicam. You can be elegant, you can be cold, it just depends on the way you move the thing. Sometimes one is forced to work alone as a one-man band, and there are certain drawbacks to that, especially in film, but also in video. It's much harder to get focus correct. It's a lot more things to take care of. It's a lot more things that you have to worry about because you're doing it all by yourself. If you have an assistant, you can leave a lot of things to him. They can build the rig for you, they pull focus for you, they handle the camera, they can worry about a lot of things. They can get you water, for God's sakes. And having some of those mechanical problems removed from you leaves you freer to focus on what you're doing. I generally consider myself a camera jockey. I'm carrying around a frame, and the fact that that frame is film or video is largely irrelevant. If I know something's going to go to TV, it tends to be a little bit more of a close-up medium. The shape of the frame is different. If I know something's going to, a theater and I have to worry about it being 40 feet high, then I have some other concerns. But largely, I'm carrying around a frame, and what I do in one medium is very similar to what I do in another. I find that I'm using longer and longer lenses, as well as short, very short, super wide, regular, normal lenses and everything else. I don't particularly like to be hampered by one set of lenses or one kind of look. I find wandering around in wide angle somewhat boring. It's useful for shots that are dealing with moving through space, but it's not useful for a lot of people shots. And it's great to walk around with extremely long lenses in 35, say a 50, a 75, or even 100. It's great to be able to move through space with those lenses. One great problem that goes away when you have a long lens is there's no horizon to worry about. So you get a little bit of this in there, nobody sees it. You got a wide-angle lens, the world's doing all this kind of stuff. But I like anything from a 9/8, very wide, to about 100. And above that, it's pretty hard to keep things in frame. And it's possible, but it's pretty hard. A good Steadicam operator is one that has all the basic skills. He can move the camera at will without losing the horizon. He can do what the director asks. A great Steadicam operator is one with a great brain. Two come to mind, Larry McConkie and Garrett Brown, who invented the Steadicam. Both of these guys are some of the smartest guys I've ever met, and they have a way of understanding what they should be doing with a camera that other operators don't seem to have. Garrett seems to have it from nowhere. It just comes out of the sky. He knows what to do, and his analysis of what goes on is so keen that it's just astonishing. Larry, on the other hand, he's brilliant, but a lot of what Larry does is ask a lot of questions of the director. Why should I go from A to B? And if he doesn't get a good answer, he keeps asking until he's satisfied, and then he knows what to do, and he can work on that and throw all his enthusiasm into the work. I'm going to show you some examples of drama situations and things we might do with that, both in high mode and low mode. We're going to do a little music video work. I think we're going to do some sitcom type situations, some talk show possibilities, things you can do with a Steadicam. And we're going to show you some opportunities and some pitfalls of working with a Steadicam in the studio situation. So stay tuned. What we want to talk about now is how to set up the Steadicam. And we've pre-set up a bunch of things, and we'll get to them in a minute, but probably the most important thing to do first is get the vest to fit right. There's a lot of attention paid to the Steadicam and the way it's balanced and everything else, and that's all very sexy, but the thing that's most important is how the Steadicam fits you, and the vest, of course, is what attaches to you. And so the way you put on the vest is going to determine how comfortable you are and how good your shooting is for the whole day. This one's preset for me to some degree, but the important thing is that the vest doesn't move. It's supposed to be a fixed point on your body, and if you try and lean and adjust the Steadicam balance or make the Steadicam move and the vest is shifting on your body, it just doesn't work very well. So we want to get it nice and tight. So make sure it's down. I've modified the attachments here to make this whole system a little tighter. Other people put foam underneath here to make it really tight. Larry McConkey does that. So the important thing is to get it so it's nice and doesn't shift. And then you tighten up these under the shoulder pads, and then you go down to the waist pads. If you do it in the opposite direction, the vest will sit up high like this, and then you put it on, and it tends to shift, which is no good. Now we're going to talk about setup and balancing the sled. And what I've done already is to put the components on the sled that I think should be there for the kind of shooting that we're doing today. The main piece is the receiver for the focus control and the amplifier for the motors. And I've got the motors already set up on the camera, and we'll get to that in a minute. I've got the battery in the position I like. There's a way of adjusting the inertia of the Steadicam, and this is the kind of ratio I like, the monitor out about this far and the battery out about that far. If I was doing a very fast moving show, if I was doing something that was really unpredictable, I might squeeze these things together because that would be useful for moving the camera faster, and maybe rock and roll video would be good to have it all squeezed in. But for the stuff we're doing right away, I've preset the battery out almost all the way and the monitor out almost all the way. I like my rig relatively compressed most of the time, so I've left it like that, and I put the gimbal fairly high up because I know that's going to make it easy for balancing. So I've preset things. I've also got a cable to get video into the Steadicam. I've got a cable here, which is the receiver cable. We're powering the camera from a brick, so we don't have any power cables going up there, and I'm not transmitting, which is something I normally do in film situations, and so we don't have any transmitters or anything like that. So I got this kind of prepared and ready to go, ready to accept things. I've also put the stage in the middle of its travel, both side to side and fore and aft, so that when I put the camera on and get it roughly trimmed, I'm not going to be at the end of the range of the side to side or fore and aft. I want to make this quick. This shouldn't take a lot of time. I've already checked everything out. I know that my focus motor system is working. I know that the video camera is working. It's giving a signal to the Steadicam. I do have a picture. The stage motors are working. So I've already checked everything out electrically before I put it together, because it's really hard, to waste your time with the thing assembled when you're trying to solve a problem. And you also want to give yourself as much time as possible if there is a problem, so you check things out first. I've already put a low mode plate on top of the camera onto the handle and checked to make sure that the handle is fairly sturdy. It is on this Betacam. On some Betacams or on some video cameras, the handles are really not very stable, and so this isn't a good way to go into low mode. If you have a bad handle or a bad adapter plate for the tripod for the bottom of the camera, you've got to find a way to wedge it or to solidify it because it has to be really solid. We're using a little homemade piece right here to screw the handle on. There are commercial things available for the same purpose. About the worst thing you can do is buy one of the commercial cages that are available. And I didn't even bring a cage to show you what it looks like because they wobble too much, and it's really a lousy way and a very cumbersome way to go into low mode. So you put a plate directly to the handle. You can use U-bolts. You can use 10-cent U-bolts and just grab the handle, and that will work well. I've also have the battery already on the camera, all the things that are going to be there. I like leaving the viewfinder on because there's useful viewfinder information that you don't get on the Steadicam. There's also a tally light, and I'll show you something we can do with the tally light later. So I like to have everything on, and then I know about where the balance point is, and it's very easy to find out where the balance point is. It's right about here. That's the center of gravity of the camera. So I make a note of that, and that's where I put the handle. I've put the second dovetail onto the quick release plate, and onto that I've added a motor system, a bracket for the focus motor, and onto the focus motor an adapter gear for the Fuji lenses that we happen to be using today. I get this all set up generally even before I begin, and then I take this plate and I'm going to put it on the Steadicam. It's much easier to do your basic setup that way. It's a lot easier to do that than try to slide that thing in with the camera on. Now I'm going to simply place the camera on here and slide it forward, and you'll notice that the gear lines up with the focusing mechanism. If you remember, the center of gravity we marked was about here when we held the camera a minute ago, and that should be slightly behind the post for a basic setup. If you find that when you balance everything out and the center of gravity of the camera is either at the post or in front of the post, then you do not have dynamic balance and the thing will behave very badly. So in general, I set it up, even just roughly, with the center of gravity slightly behind the post, maybe about this much, as a general guide before I start my fine balancing. I was using a Tri-X adapter, or a Tri-X cable, and that was part of my setup. I would, at this point, really like to have it plugged in, and I would run the cable around the Steadicam so that it exited from the gimbal. That's how I prefer to do it. And since this has such a large effect on balance, you also want to set that up ahead of time. The important thing is that before you balance the camera, everything you want on the camera is on the camera. You don't add something later. There aren't filters or a matte box or a brick or something that you're going to add later. Figure out what you need before you go. Also be sure that everything you need for low mode is there ahead of time, because who knows when you're going to go to low mode, and you don't want to add that later on. So everything you need is on before you balance. Balancing is quite simple. As far as I'm concerned, it should not take a lot of time. We've already put the center of gravity slightly behind the post. And we say, oh, it's front heavy, so that's the worst thing. So I simply undo the thing, slide it back in a nice rough way, get it as close as I can in a rough way, and then I use the fine tuning here to set things up side to side, fore and aft, and of course the all-important top to bottom. And that's a drop time that I sort of like, and we've already preset that, so it's done. Okay, I'm just fine-tuning the static balance here before I go into dynamic balance. You want to get everything nice and straight, perfectly level, perfectly good side to side. My assistant John is helping me by holding on to things. There's a lot of pressure out on this little arrangement for the spin balancing, so you always want to have somebody else there as a safety. We're going to give it a spin and see if it spins flat, because although it's balanced this way, nice and straight up and down, when you move it around the studio, you want to have the balance helping you keep it upright. So we're going to give it a little spin. You don't have to go real fast. And you notice that it takes off a little bit. Now sometimes it's you giving it a bad spin, and sometimes it's it. So we try it a couple of times. And indeed, this dips down a little bit. Now you have two choices. You can either move the monitor in, or the monitor out, or the battery in, or the battery out, moving some weight down here a little bit in one way or another, and then you do the opposite with the camera to get it back into static balance. But you only have two directions, out or in. So we're going to try moving the monitor out a little bit, which will mean that we'll move the camera back for static balance. So here we go. We're going to go out about, I don't know, 1/3 of an inch, something like that. And we're going to compensate by moving the camera back. So we're back in a state of static balance. Now none of this is really bad. It's not way out of dynamic balance, and depending on the kind of move you're making, this may be adequate. But if you can set up your camera this way ahead of time, that will help you out a great deal. There's nothing like having the camera work better for you. And this is closer to a good dynamic balance. Now, because we normally trim in terms of headroom by adjusting something like that so that it hangs and holds headroom, you are not going to be in dynamic balance. I can't even spin it here, but it will not be in dynamic balance. So don't go nuts trying to get it in dynamic balance with everything absolutely level, and you're tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and driving yourself crazy, because when you normally shoot, you're not going to be in either static balance or dynamic balance exactly, and you can just go nuts trying to do it. But that's the routine. The last thing we want to do is adjust the weight carrying capacity of the arm to the Steadicam that we've now assembled. And then, after that, a little mechanical bit of business, we are going to get used to the feel of the Steadicam. You always want to make sure that you know how the Steadicam feels, because it will change day to day, camera to camera. After lunch, it will feel slightly different than it did before lunch. And so you want to be sure it all feels right, and you learn that with your muscles. So we take the weight, and you notice that we're getting a little extra creaking here. Okay. And the arm is about right. These arms like to be slightly up from normal. The older style arms with the 3As and EFPs and other older Steadicams like to be slightly down nominally, but these like to be up. And what you want to watch is that both sections of the arm here move together. If one does all the work and the other doesn't follow, then it doesn't give you a good ride. You can slightly with these arms, if you have a very high shot, adjust them up so they're both a little bit up, so it tends to ride a little higher. Or you can adjust them a little bit down. This whole business should take no more than 3/4 of an hour to an hour. I like to give myself an hour in case there's a problem. I like to build that into the day if I can. And if they won't give me that kind of time to protect myself, I will try and come in early. There's nothing worse than, everyone else being ready to go and you're still fiddling with some mechanical interconnection or finding out that a cable doesn't work or something terrible like that. So I like to give myself an hour. Hopefully it only takes half an hour or less, and then you have the rest of the time for coffee and donuts. Okay. The next thing we want to talk about is the electronic setup of the Steadicam, and depending upon the model of Steadicam you have, this is either a bigger or smaller deal. On this particular Steadicam, we have frame lines, which I can adjust the intensity of. You can see them here. And what I've set these frame lines to is the TV safe area that appears in the viewfinder. So I zoom in and out until I find appropriate marks on the wall somewhere that's convenient, and look at the lines that are in the monitor, and then conform these lines. Here's, like, I'm adjusting the top one here, so that it matches what I see in the viewfinder. I do the same for the sides and the bottom. And then I adjust the intensity of those lines so that if I'm really concerned about it, they can go away, or I can dial them up so they're very bright. And then, let's see, I can also adjust the level. You see there's a little level indicator here. And I'm going to set this off level so you can see how it behaves. All right, and I'm actually going to switch the thing around because I like it to look like a level. So you can see it's high on this side, it's like a bubble. And I need to adjust that level to camera level because although it all may look right, the little sensor that's in here may not match the camera exactly. So what we do, and this is why I have a stand the way I have it, I like to keep a little bubble level, and I will place that somewhere on the camera that I know is level. I will adjust the Steadicam to be sure it actually is level. And of course I can't see it very well there, so I'll put it somewhere else where I can see it. So it's actually, the Steadicam is actually level. That's the first thing. You make sure the Steadicam is level, camera's upright. And then using an adjustment tool, okay, I would adjust a little pot down here and make sure that the electronic level conforms to real level. If you don't have an electronic level, you can use one of the bubble levels that might be on your Steadicam, or you can add a bubble level to your Steadicam and make sure that that also reads level. In the Master Series, there is an adjustment underneath this cover, which I've just pulled off. Here's the pot right here. And if you adjust this little thing, it determines how fast or how slow the bubble responds. If it's set to 0, the numbers go from 0 to 9, and then I think A to F, and F is the highest and slowest, and 0 is the lowest. If it's set really low to 0, it's really fast, and it's almost impossible to watch. If you set it up, somewhere like 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there, you may find that the response of the bubble is a lot easier to watch. We're almost done with setup, but there are a couple more things we need to talk about. One is the focus motor controller. This one happens to be made by Sights. It's a wireless or wired if you want to, but generally a wireless controller. And if you turn a knob here, it turns a motor, which then will turn the lens. And you can also have a separate motor for iris or a motor for zoom, although the zoom doesn't work really like a real zoom. It's good for changing focal lengths, and maybe you can hide that in a set, but it's not a real zoom. This requires an assistant, of course, during the shot. And if you don't have an assistant during the shot, you need to have some other kind of device to control the focus while you're going, and maybe a self-controlled zoom. There are some of these that are commercially available. You can steal one or borrow one from a standard camera setup and just tape it to your handle in some kind of way and run a cable up there to control the zoom and the focus. But this is a wonderful box to have, and most Steadicam operators have them. Part of the problem with all focus motors controllers, focus motors, is that there's a mechanical flex that's between the motor itself on its mounting rods and the zoom lens, and especially if this mount isn't particularly good or loose, and this one's kind of loose in the back, you get additional flex. So sometimes, no matter how good the machine is, you're going to have some change in the indexing of the lens from one direction to another. Try to solve that with using a double motor, double rod mount here. But the procedure is to center the controller in the middle of its range by zeroing out the pots. That's how this one works. Some other manufacturers have automatic setup, which is kind of neat. But anyway, I've mechanically zeroed the pots out, placed the lens in the center of its travel, and engaged the motor, and I just tighten it in there so that it kind of sits there. And got that. And now I'll make the lens go to one end by adjusting a pot at one end of the dial, and it goes to infinity, and then I'll dial it all the way back the other way, and I'll dial up the bottom of the range. And now it goes from infinity to 0 quite nicely. And then I'll have the assistant make little marks for, say, 3 feet, 2 feet, 1.5 feet. then he can pull focus. It's quite an art to pull focus. It's probably a little bit beyond the scope of this video, but a good focus puller is critical to doing good work. One of the things we don't want to do is we don't want to be stuck in wide angle with a Steadicam. We want to be able to use all the lenses, all the focal lengths that are available to any other camera. There's no reason to throw all that away simply because we have a Steadicam. One problem for a Steadicam operator in a studio situation is the lack of a tally light. There are no commercially available ones. So what a lot of us have done is to take a small photo cell and place it over the tally light that exists on the front of the camera and relay it down to a little box. And when the camera is turned on, the tally light comes on. And it's a small thing, costs about 25 bucks, but it's part of the kind of gear that you may need to create to make your life easier. I wanted to show you in a little more detail how the Tri-X adapter works. This is the one from Similar Products. You attach it, the back of it, to your vest. I've hung it off here in a fairly simple way with some gaffer tape, and that's fine. Run it over the shoulder, and then the front part attaches to the dovetail here. And then there's a break point, a different kind of connector, much smaller. And the wire, as you notice here, is much, much smaller and thinner than the standard piece of Tri-X, which is like that. This connects to the cable that goes into the camera. This is your standard connector that would go into the back of the camera. And then you'd run that from the camera, like that, around to a point where you could grab it at the gimbal, and then this small piece, smaller end, would then come along the arm and attach here. And then when you break from the camera, you break it here. The idea is that this thin and flexible cable won't affect your operating so much. In my bag of tricks, I carry things like very long posts, in case I want to get the camera very, very high, or higher than normal than I can get with the arm. And I also have in here the infamous F-bracket, which is the necessary accessory for low mode. Now, I want to talk about this bracket the way it comes from the factory, whether it's this model for the Master Series or whether it's a model from a previous time, like a 3 or an EFP. One thing you want to do is you want to pin the post, this little tiny post, which the whole Steadicam is going to hang from. Here, it's going to go in the gimbal like that. You want to be sure that that's pinned, because the little screws that are provided won't hold. They will give way at some point. So you want to be sure that post is pinned in there. The other thing you want to do is make sure the post is as short as possible. All right, there's absolutely no need for a very long post, except maybe if you're doing tabletop work or something really strange. Almost all the time you want a post that's absolutely as short as possible, doesn't stick out. And you'll have to simply take a hacksaw to the piece and a drill through everything, and you can make it nice if you want, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so this piece goes in here, and then there's a safety screw. On some of the older models, the screw goes through the gimbal, and it's what you need all the little tools for, because that's got to be tightened down. It's the first thing you do in getting things to go to low mode. Okay, put that away. Then we have to flip the monitor. Now, I've tightened this monitor up quite a bit. So there's a screw here, and it flips over. There we go. That was easy. This little switch down here has to be flipped for the bubble. This one down here. And you can pull off the cables any way that's convenient. But I usually like to count them, because here we only have two, one for the video, one for the focus motor, but sometimes you have a power cable, and sometimes you have like the Tri-X cable or something like that, and you may have to be pulling that off. Anyway, I like to count them, so make sure I got them all off before I go further. And then it's quite simple. You release it, and also it's really nice to have an assistant here, but it's not entirely necessary. Pulls off, and I put the camera upside down. This upsets video engineers. Oh, God. And then you just got to line it up square, and it looks very awkward for a while. There's the safety. Now, had we remembered or made a mark as to where this plate was before, we could put the other plate in the same place. But I've just put it somewhere and then you reroute your cables. All right. Turn it upside down. God help us, this looks rough. But in fact, it's relatively easy. Okay. So now the monitor is actually upright, and we would turn it on, we would adjust the bubble like we did before. I'm not going to bother to do that right now. And the most important thing, of course, is to rebalance. So I generally don't do this alone, but I think, there we go. So I'm here, so we're front heavy. And so I release this, and I move the weight uphill. Move it so it's, again, in a kind of rough balance. And I'm probably top heavy a little bit. So I get it close. And again, you notice I'm moving fast. I'm trying to move fairly fast. I got a little side to side here. Check my bottom heaviness this way. It's a little slow. I'm blocking you here, so I'm going to go around. So it's a little slow, so I'm going to move the gimbal up. All right. And I would remember that when I'm going from high mode to low mode, I'm going to move this gimbal about that much. So the next time I do this during the day with this equipment, I know to move the gimbal just that much. And now basically we're ready to go. All right. We could, in addition, go through the dynamic balance, but if you've got dynamic balance right for high mode, it's going to be very close again for low mode. You're going to be in a generally pretty good situation because dynamic balance really depends on the arrangement of the monitor to the battery more than any other thing. So if it's right for high mode, it's probably going to be pretty good for low mode, and you're ready to go. So the next time I do this during the day with this equipment, I know to move the gimbal just that much. And now basically we're ready to go. All right. We could, in addition, go through the dynamic balance, but if you've got dynamic balance right for high mode, it's going to be very close again for low mode. You're going to be in a generally pretty good situation because dynamic balance really depends on the arrangement of the monitor to the battery more than any other thing. So if it's right for high mode, it's probably going to be pretty good for low mode, and you're ready to go.
Section 2, Studio Survey.
The first thing that I like to do when I come on set after I've had my morning coffee is to find out what my job is. It's more important than setting up the gear. It's more important than anything else. I want to know what I am doing. I've got a pretty good idea already because of conversations with the production manager or the director or someone about why they've hired me. They've hired me to solve a problem. Maybe they want me to come up onto a stage and they can't move a camera there. Maybe they just want to penetrate that space and have some kind of close-up. Maybe they want a rock and roll kind of look. At least I know what they've hired me for, and I want to be able to solve that problem for them. I want to deliver on what they've asked me to do. The next thing I want to do is be sure that I'm not going to give them any problems. I'm not going to fall down. I'm not going to tangle a cable. I'm not going to have a light flare my lens or something like that. And in order to make sure that I don't give them any of those kinds of problems, I will survey the set. And I'll do it without the Steadicam on. It's really important to do it without the Steadicam on because, one, you do it early and you begin to communicate with other people about your needs or your problems early so they can solve them if it's a matter of readjusting the lights. And the other thing is that it's really painful to carry the Steadicam around to discover things that you can discover without it on. I will also look at the lights. I mean, it's really important to look at the lights or the extent of the set. Most of the cameras that are shooting in this direction don't look offset, and they know where they are. But when you start coming in and they ask you to do shots that are more to the side or something like that, it's very easy to either shoot off the set or to see a light or some other flag or apparatus that the other cameras don't normally see. And because you're so flexible, it's yeah, it's quite possible that you can screw up and see off the set. So I will go around the set thinking about the various shots that the directors talked to me about, or possibilities, and say, well, you know, it's all very nice, but if I get over here to do a particular kind of shot, I've suddenly got a flare from a light, and I've got to do something about it. And I go and I look, and you know, the director says, oh, I want the camera down here. So I put my face right where it is, and I look around, and I notice that I'm getting certain kinds of flare. Once I get rid of the bogeys, once I make sure that the bogeys aren't there, and here's another bogey. From this direction in particular, we have a lot of hard lights. We're keyed from this side, and basically what we're seeing on the back are a lot of problems. So if I was shooting in this direction as you are, there's a really good chance of the shadow of the camera getting on the subject. Now on the other side of the set, where we're not keyed, there's a little window. There's a place in here where in fact we could get the same sort of shot and not cast a shadow onto the set, onto me. You've got a pretty, you're clear here. And so there's a window. If we needed for some reason to be shooting from the other side, it might be a conversation with the lighting director about, can we remove that key from that point, or one of those keys. But these are things you want to do early so that they have time to adjust them. You don't want to, like, we're ready to go and, oh, by the way, I just discovered this light. It takes time. The last thing I want to talk about right now is cable pulling, and the fact that a lot of times working in a studio situation, you're going to find yourself with a cable. Maybe future technologies are going to eliminate that, and there are ways around it, but a lot of times you will be working with a cable. And that cable and the people pulling the cable and all that is a fairly large nightmare. And so you want to be prepared for that nightmare. If you have to have a shot that comes across and then they want to cut, I mean, how do you pull apart a triax in the middle of something? Well, people don't like doing that very much. So you have to not only find ways to get your shot, but you have to find ways to get out of your shot. And perhaps last but not least, you have to make it clear to other people that you can't hold this frame forever. This isn't a particularly good use of the Steadicam right now, holding this absolutely static frame. It's much nicer if you're moving. But it's very, very hard to hold static shots. And it's also very hard to do unrehearsed stuff, because an actor may, you know, quickly do something like that and kind of fool you. So if you find yourself, if the director wants you to sit there and hold a shot like this, suggest to him perhaps that this is better done on a tripod or with a crane or some other apparatus. So be sure that they're using you well. Okay? And then when you aren't being used, when you're using some of the other cameras that are around, give yourself a rest. Let them know you are not going to hold this frame, because this takes an enormous amount of work.
Section 3, rehearsing the shot.
Now we want to meet with the director and the other technical people and get very, very specific about what we're actually going to do. We've done some general work before, we've looked around, we've built the camera, it's all ready to go. Now it's time to get serious. I'm very serious about marks and getting directions. I don't believe that they should just, you know, suit me up in this device and say, go at it, do that Steadicam thing. I don't like that. I don't like being given that kind of assignment. So I tend to ask a lot of questions about, what do you want me to do and why do you want me to do it? The more people articulate those things to me, and sometimes I have to ask and ask and ask again and again and again to get that kind of information, but the more people tell me what they want, what they need, why I'm here, the better I am able to deliver something that everybody is ultimately happy about. Then when you know what those shots are, when you know what your job is, what your major job is, it's time to rehearse. It's time to lay down some marks to put on the rig. I like marks that either indicate what the camera sees, or if it's just a start mark for me, sometimes just a little mark by one of my feet, since I know what I'm going to do from there. But let's go ahead and bring in a mark. Indicates the camera. And then, so that's the start. That's one mark for the beginning. And then as I truck over, there might be a mark for the end. And we would have another mark down there, laid on the floor. And if we're lucky, these can be left on the floor during the show. If we're not lucky, we're going to have removable marks. But let's assume we could do this. So now I've got a mark to begin, and I know where I'm going, and I can reach that frame for the end. And I can continue to reach the same frame, which is going to be very useful, especially if we have an opportunity to shoot off the set or something like that. Now, there may be a lot going on while I'm trying to get this shot, and my momentary look down to find that mark, might disturb my concentration from what's going on, in the shot, and I might, blow headroom or let somebody fly out of frame or something like that. And so if I need a little bit more help, I might have a line that goes from one mark to the other mark. And I might have an additional line that goes from that mark out in a V so that I know when I'm getting close to this mark. And I will use anything and everything to make sure that my marks are good and solid and I can get to them and do my job shooting the shot. Sometimes it's very important to have a mark in the set for one part of the shot, but in another part of the shot or in some other camera shot, the mark will show. And this is a very classic way to have a removable mark. My shot is going to back up to this point, to the V. Bring it in just a hair. Bring your V point in just a hair. Yeah, because I don't want to go off the edge. And then as I back away, we can take the mark away. So here's the shot. I'm starting in close, showing a shadow, but anyway. And then I back up, and I can find that V so I know exactly where I am with the edge of the stage. And now as I back away, that can be pulled out. And it's a way of surviving.
Section 4, Operating Techniques. Shot Design Talk Shows. In this talk show entrance shot, Holway leads the talent center stage, then finishes off camera right to allow for a cut. Here, Holway demonstrates an arcing shot from left to right. Note the footwork and the energy he works into the shot. Here, Holway demonstrates a hazard of the Steadicam, casting your own shadow on the subject. The Steadicam can travel from the audience to the stage, matching the energy and speed of the talent. Notice Holway held back a bit to get a wider shot and the way the shot is feathered out to the end marks. For this bumper shot, utilize the set and a changing image size to inject a little energy into the scene. This is an example of a top spin bumper shot. Note how the spin resolves itself and a little boom up at the end. Shot Design Music Shows. In this shot, Holway makes use of Dutch angles to add more energy to shooting music shows. Note the way he constantly changes the frame from a close-up to a wide, then back in again. For this shot, take advantage of studio props. Holway starts off with a Dutch angle off of the studio camera, maintains a slow walk-in, then quickly moves in to match the energy of the talent. We can see that changing the angles and pace of the shot adds interest and energy. Here, Holway demonstrates how the use of the lighting grid can add visual interests to shooting music shows. Shot design, drama shows. The head of this dramatic shot is dynamic and contains real energy. This is a great voice for the Steadicam. Slipping into the point of view is often clumsy. Again, we might be better served by a cut, but the talent's re-entry into the shot works well. Note Holway steps onto the platform to allow the talent to exit the shot. A great benefit of the Steadicam is its ability to go where other cameras cannot. Note how Holway works with his spotter to get the shot. Holway is confident he will not fall or hit anything, so the move under the ladder is not tentative, but strong. Here, Holway demonstrates the earthquake shot. The trick here is to have the actors move simultaneously with the Steadicam. Note how the camera movement changes as the action in the scene shifts. Even the framing changes from short-sighting at the beginning to a more balanced composition at the end. shot design, fashion shows. Here, Holway demonstrates a good excuse for low mode, shooting footwear. Notice how far back and severe the tilt required for the end of the shot. Here, Holway shows us an alternate low mode shot to solve the problem we had in the previous fashion shot. Here, we can see a great use of the Steadicam in the low mode configuration. Closing tips.
What's really great about the Steadicam is when you get good with it, when you've practiced really hard and you've done your exercises and you've thought about the kind of shots you want to do, is that the Steadicam responds to your will as if you're playing a violin. You know, just like music. You want it to go up, it goes up. You want it to move in, it moves in. And if you can get to a point where your ideas become movements, then you can use your ideas to help tell stories. And that's where the real fun of Steadicam happens, whether it's a music video and you're doing something really crazy, or whether it's a really intimate acting scene and you just move up as the actors raise the intensity, or, you know, whether you're just running like crazy in low mode over the sand and, you know, stuff like that, which is just really kinetic. All those things are at your fingertips. If you can think it, it happens, and it's so much fun. So just keep practicing, keep plugging away, and have a great time.